And then another issue for me was, somewhere you stated that you were concerned about global warming, that carbon dioxide levels had to be controlled, and that you thought the EPA was pretty slick. Could you expound on some of these ideas?
Well, I don't know where you got those statements from, but I guess we could start with global warming. I'm taking the Bjorn Lomborg approach when it comes to global warming, and that is that let's just accept that it is happening, and let's accept that it's man-caused. That said, should we implement cap-and-trade legislation? No. And the best solution to reduced carbon emissions are the fact that you and I, as consumers, want less carbon emission, and we're going to get that. Energy will be cleaner 50 years from now than it is today, as it is cleaner today than it was 50 years ago. So it's something that we're demanding, and if you take all the money that we would be applying toward this problem and applied it in other environmental ways, clean water, clean air, that we would actually have a very beneficial impact for that money spent relative to carbon emission.
So EU wouldn't spend a whole bunch of money trying to reduce our carbon footprint, as they call it.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't be spending any money. I think that that we will be getting less carbon emission because we as consumers are demanding that. Very free market, and that in a free market today, that's what we're demanding.
And the notion of putting the globe warms up because we're not doing this. Man has to adapt to this. Mankind has to adapt to a warmer climate, a warmer globe.
Well, if long-term consequence of our existence in the whole scheme of things is the sun is getting closer to the earth, and that at a point in the very distant future, the sun will actually encompass the earth. So global warming is something that's going to be inevitable.
Whether we do something about it or struggle against the gods or not. Okay. So we have to adapt to this as a species.
Well, when you talk about global warming and environmentalism, I think we should be good stewards of the planet. We shouldn't be polluting, and in this case, the notion of carbon emission. Let's reduce carbon emission, but that is not a government. That is not something that should be legislated or taxed.
How about polluting water, polluting air? Is this a government function, or?
You know, I think the fundamental role of government is to protect us against individuals, groups, corporations, foreign countries that would do us harm. And based on my experience as governor of New Mexico, there are, in this case, businesses that polluted. And so who brings those polluters to bear, if you will? And there is a method by which you as a private citizen could sue and be brought compensation, but I would argue that some of these companies are so large that you as an individual would not be effective in that endeavor. And so I think that the EPA, environmental protection agencies, first of all, I'm promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. In that balanced budget to Congress would be a 43% reduction in Environmental Protection Agency. I think that maybe wrings out the excess, but leaves it with a core function of this protection of you and I against companies that would be doing us harm, polluting our water.
So if General Motors, which is a big presence here in Lansing, pollutes, the procedure would be that I would have to complain to the EPA. They would investigate. They would run it through some kind of a bureaucracy. democracy for 5 or 10 years, and then they would fine General Motors. Where do I get my restitution?
Well, first of all, comparing that scenario to a scenario where the EPA didn't exist and you had to take on that litigation yourself, I would argue that maybe you would never see results for your concern going about it from a private standpoint as opposed to the government.
So your analysis shows that the private market approach just doesn't work in these unbalanced.
It may very well work in certain situations, but based on my experience as governor of New Mexico, it took the really heavy hand of government, and I say heavy hand in this case to protect citizens of New Mexico from, in this case, real live polluters.
Okay. Yeah, I don't recall that there were too many problems in New Mexico there was some mining, but those have long since gone under.
In New Mexico, there was a Molycorp mine, which had metals contamination that started right at the point of their mine from their releasing their used water into the Red River. And for decades, they had been allowed to continue this practice. And as governor, we demanded that they clean up this activity. And they denied that they were responsible for this activity. And I told them that they had to come up with a cleanup order. I gave them a deadline, and if they weren't going to come up with that cleanup order, that I would use the heaviest hand that I had, which was to turn them into a Superfund site by turning them over to the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And they refused up until the point of that deadline, and they became a Superfund site.
Still operating?
It is.
It is, yeah, although they had to clean up their effluent.
Well, they've had to come up with a plan to clean up the effluent, and I would argue that that plan is a lot more onerous than if they would have worked with the state to come up with that same plan.
Any other statements about environmentalism that might interest us?
Well, just that I think as a society, we really do care about clean air, clean water, that we do care, that we all really do care about the environment we live in, and that without a clean environment, there are consequences to that. And I think maybe the role of government to protect us against environmental action that is detriment is maybe one of government's fundamental roles, and can be any sort of detrimental action.
Let's get back to more of the notions of what kind of campaign you envision. You were running as a Republican, didn't catch much traction, and I'm not sure why. Maybe they didn't quite want two libertarians on the ticket or something. And, you know, and Ron Paul has been around for so long, and has this absolute reputation that has sort of intruded himself into the culture almost. And you had raised a certain amount of money. Now you announced as a libertarian. Has your funding sources dried up, or what's happened to those?
No. Funding has been really good all through, and no complaints whatsoever.
Libertarian candidates have managed to spend, I think, about $1 million. At least that's what they've raised. I'm not sure how much they've actually spent on, you know, ads and such like. Would you see any way of getting more than that, or is that about what the limit is?
Well, I think what's really significant in this upcoming election is if the Libertarian candidate for president gets 5% of the general election vote, that the Libertarian Party will receive $90 million in federal matching funds. I think that's very significant and can make a big difference nationally. Now, that $90 million would be controlled by the next, if the candidate for president this cycle gets 5%, then in 2016 that $90 million would be controlled by the candidate for president in 2016. If that were me in 2016, I would certainly be making investment in state parties and state apparatus, because ultimately that advances the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian nominee, both.
I had not perceived that before. That's why people get excited about that pile of money. Interesting. Any other ways of campaigning?
Well, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think there was the opportunity to actually win. And here's the scenario by which that happens, and that is that if the Libertarian candidate for president gets 15 or polls at 15%, then the Libertarian candidate for president will be on the debate stage against Romney and Obama, believing Romney is going to be the nominee. Well, if that happens, given the fact that 80% of Americans right now are saying they would consider voting for a third-party candidate, I think anything is possible. And based on my experience running as a Republican, appearing in 2 out of the 18 debates up until the point that I dropped out, fundraising kind of went through the roof relative to what it had been prior to my being in those debates. So 15% polling on this, and I'm not presuming to be the Libertarian nominee, but this is the possibility that exists. And that's the pie-in-the-sky scenario by which the Libertarian Party significantly advances, I think.
Okay, very good. Any other areas where you see yourself as differing a little bit from the Libertarian Party line? I mean, there's a standard plank there. Standard.
Well, I'd like to just point out that the ACLU did a report card on all the presidential candidates. This was about 5 weeks ago. And ACLU, a group dedicated to civil liberties, a group dedicated to the Constitution, a group dedicated to the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They came out with a report card on all the presidential candidates. Perfect score was 24 Liberty torches. Newt Gingrich had 4 Liberty torches. Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney had 0 Liberty torches. Obama had 16 Liberty torches. Ron Paul had 18 Liberty torches. And I had 21 Liberty torches.
Congratulations.
So, yes, thank you. So I think that's an accurate portrayal of the civil liberties side of this. And then along with civil liberties, which I think the Libertarian Party embodies, is also the fiscal side of this. And I'm going to argue my credentials when it comes to being a fiscal conservative really are unmatched, and I just put up all those vetoes. I put up the fact that as governor of New Mexico, good government was easy. It wasn't hard. It was easy to look at issues first and politics last.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.